What if someone took a great handheld, like this Retroid Pocket 5, and made it better with a single change? What, you don't believe it can be done? Well, I have news for you. It can. So shut up. Hey there, how's it going? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. When I was in college, I used to live with my great aunt, and my commute to school was super long. I had to take a bus to the subway, and then a subway to the train station, and then the train to my school's town, and then a bus from the train station to my school. However, there was this place that I discovered that was a little scoot out of the way. If I took a different bus, I could get to a different subway station, and it took an extra like 10 or 15 minutes, but there was a donut shop right near the subway station, and they had these donuts that were like a cream-filled thing. You know, like with chocolate on top, but the filling was peanut butter cream. I loved these donuts so much, you guys. Every now and then I treat myself. That was like one of the highlights of my week. And then I finished my first year of college and I went home for the summer. And when I came back for my second year, I was excited to get back and get one of those peanut butter cream donuts. However, when I got to the donut shop, I was shocked to see that the donuts were all different. They had changed their menu or whatever, and my favorite donut wasn't there. But they did have one there that looked like the peanut butter cream donut. It was called something about macadamia nuts, macadamia custard or something, I don't remember. I just remember that I bit into that donut, and it was like twice as good as the old one. All they did was swap the peanut filling for a macadamia nut filling. It was basically the same donut I loved, but with an updated recipe that made it better. And now I'm hungry for donuts, and I'm also hungry to review the Retroid Pocket G2. And believe it or not, my donut story kind of sums up what I think about this thing. By which I mean it's full of macadamia nut goo instead of peanut butter goo. Obviously. The Retroid Pocket G2 is nothing more than an updated Retroid Pocket 5, with some new guts on the inside. That's it. Same size, same screen, same controls, same ports, same shape, even the same price. It's literally a Retroid Pocket 5, but with one change: the chip that powers it. Oh, and they also have some new colors. It comes in turquoise and yellow now. That's fun. So I'll spoil the video now. I'll give you my final verdict. If you've been thinking about getting a Retroid Pocket 5, then you should get this. It's the same but better. And if you don't like the look of the Retroid Pocket 5, if you don't want one, or if you have one and you don't like it for reasons other than the performance, then you shouldn't get this. It's that simple. But here's the thing, the Retroid Pocket 5 is a legendary doodad. Almost everyone loves the RP5 from what I can glean from the chit-chat that I see handheld lovers chit-chatting. I personally love the RP5. It's one of Retroid's best devices in my opinion. Actually, it's in my top 10 and probably my top 5 retro doodads ever, which is saying a lot because I've had a lot of retro doodads come and go. So for me and lots of people, I think the idea of a Retroid Pocket 5 with more power is appealing. It's like a little donut shop taking the donut you love and replacing the peanut butter cream filling with a Snapdragon G2 Gen 2 and getting more than twice the performance. It's just like that. Before we get into the new stuff, I think the G2 makes a lot more sense if I tell you what people like about the RP5, why this thing is so well loved. Let's start with the form factor, and this is kind of subjective. Everyone has different hands and preferences, but for me and lots of people, the Retroid Pocket 5 is super comfy. It's that kind of middle ground sweet spot in terms of size and ergonomics. Small enough to fit in the pocket, but big enough to feel cozy in your hands. And of course, the screen. Oh man, this screen is freaking lovely. Like you. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's 5.5 inches, 1080p, and OLED. And even as OLED screens go, this one is so good. It's super bright and crisp, nice saturated colors. The downside is that it's only 60 Hz, so no high refresh rate gaming on here. The controls are great, the D-pad's on top if you like that, and it's a great D-pad. All sticks and triggers, nice satisfying face buttons. Oh, speaking of which, because I know I'm going to be asked a million times, these face buttons on my Retroid Pocket G2 are the old retro style face buttons that Retroid used to make for the RP2S. I had these on my RP5 and then I moved them over to this thing. They don't sell these anymore, unfortunately. But please, Retroid, make these buttons again. And you watching this, bug Retroid to offer these buttons in their store. If enough of us ask, they'll probably do it. Come on, let's start a revolution. Game Boy style buttons on everything. Anyways, the RP5 was well loved for those reasons and probably a whole bunch of other ones. So the idea of getting exactly the same thing but with way more performance for the exact same price is that's the kind of bargain I can get behind. Actually, on the topic of the performance, let's get right to the benchmarks because the rest of this discussion only makes sense when we have the data. Data? Data. We need the data. Now? Yes, data. Let's go. Yes, sir. I'll get the data. Hey, we need the data. Wait, the data? Now? Yeah, but it's not ready. We need more time. We don't have time. Get the data. I'm trying. Data. Okay, here's the data. Oh, hey, thanks for the data. I have the data, sir. Yep, that's good data. I hope you appreciate all I do for you with these videos. You won't get quality data like this from those other videos. Okay, so I have the data from some benchmarks, Geekbench 6 and 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, on 3 devices, the Retroid Pocket 5, the Retroid Pocket G2, and the Ein Thor. Actually, before we get into the data, here's a quick rundown of what's inside each of these things, because numbers without context are just like math. And you didn't sign up for math, and I don't know how to do math, so yeah, let's go through this. The Retroid Pocket 5 has a Snapdragon 865 chip, which is kind of old now. It's still a solid chip, but it's definitely not a powerhouse by today's standards. This new Retroid Pocket G2 uses a chip called the Snapdragon G2 Gen 2, which is brand new and it's actually made specifically for handheld gaming devices like this. This is the first one that we've seen in the wild, so that's pretty exciting. And the Ein Thor uses the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is a beast of a chip, the same one used in flagship Android phones. On paper, it should crush the rest of them. So let's look at some benchmarks and see how big the performance gap actually is, because as boring as numbers are, I like them when they make my toys go faster. First up is GPU scores, using 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, which is a very high-end benchmark that's sorta supposed to capture like gaming performance kind of thing. The Retroid Pocket 5 managed a score of 1,334. The Retroid Pocket G2 absolutely rockets ahead with a score of 3,064. More than double the Retroid Pocket 5. And then the Thor comes along with a score of 3,694. That's almost 3 times what the Retroid Pocket 5 managed, and also about 20% better than the new Retroid Pocket G2. So yeah, if the Retroid Pocket 5 is our baseline, and it is because I say it is, the G2 is a massive jump, and the Thor is a step above that. And when it comes to the CPU, I went with Geekbench 6. The RP5 got a 1,216 single-core score and a 3,436 multi-core score. The Retroid Pocket G2 bumps that up to 1,880 single-core and 5,026 multi-core. And the Thor pulls out ahead just a little further. 1,984 single and 5,413 multi. That's only about 5 to 8% faster than the G2, which honestly is kind of impressive for the G2. So think of these results like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is the fastest, but the G2 gets pretty darn close, and even still the G2 is miles ahead compared to the older RP5. In practice, the difference in gaming performance between all these devices will depend on what you want to play. The older RP5 can handle most emulation tasks, everything up to GameCube and PS2. Only the hardest to run games from those systems will give you problems on the RP5. And if you wanted to play those games, then yeah, they're gonna run perfect on the G2. However, when it comes to the frontiers of emulation, stuff like Switch and PC emulation with GameHub, this is where things get spicy. Let's start with the PC stuff, why not? I recently made a video of PC gaming on the Retroid Pocket 5, so check that out if you want to know more about that topic or see how the games ran on that device. A few quick comparisons though. The first is Mega Bonk, and just in the main menu seen here for consistency. And the performance across the board was great. However, it was a lot better on the higher end doodads. On the RP5, I got around 70 FPS. On the new Retroid Pocket G2, I got around 105 FPS. And on the Ein Thor, I got up to 140 FPS, and that scales pretty accurately with the benchmarks that we ran earlier. give or take. However, in a more demanding game like Skyrim, this is weird because the Retroid Pocket 5 got us around 50 FPS, the RPG 2 got us around 75 FPS or so that's a big bump there, but the Ein Thor only managed around 45 FPS. It did the worst out of all of them. I even triple checked the settings. It's the same settings across all the devices. So I think there's just some like PC game emulation weirdness happening, and I wouldn't put too much faith in these numbers. One thing I do want to mention about the Retroid Pocket G2, which is kind of confusing, is that it actually ran more games at the default settings. Some games that I had to tinker with to get working on the RP5 and the Thor, they just worked right away on the G2. I didn't test all my games or anything, but I tested like 10, and every single one worked perfectly immediately, which wasn't the case on the RP5. And I have no explanation for why that would be. I could guess that maybe since this chip is made for handhelds, that maybe the GPU has better compatibility or something, or maybe it's just random PC game emulation weirdness. I don't know, but I did want to mention it. However, I don't necessarily think that this is the best device for PC emulation, specifically because it only has 8 gigabytes of RAM. And for higher-end PC emulation tasks, you're going to want more than 8 gigabytes. It's like trying to run demanding games on a macadamia custard donut. It tastes great, but it's not going to work as well for high-end emulation tasks compared to a device with more RAM. Also, we're limited to 128 gigabytes of internal storage, which is fine for most emulation stuff because you can store your ROMs on your SD card, but as of the time of filming this video, you need to store your PC games on your device. And 128 gigabytes fills up pretty quick when you start downloading some larger PC games. If you stick to indie games, you can put a ton on here. That's what I'm planning on doing. But higher end stuff, you're gonna wish that you had more storage, even if you do have the performance to run that stuff. And Switch ran great, apart from Zelda Breath of the Wild. That wouldn't launch for me for whatever reason. I didn't tinker with it. Maybe it's a RAM limitation. Maybe I could have found a different ROM or something. I don't know. I didn't care enough. Everything else ran perfect. I don't think this is the device you should get if you want all the best Switch games to run perfectly, because lots of those specifically need more than 8 gigabytes of RAM, but you can run a good amount of Switch games on here and have a great time. That's about all I can tell you. And obviously, all the other emulation stuff you could want to do is no problem. Most stuff was easy to run on the RP5 as well, so like, it's the same here. I assume you're going to get better battery life though. When I was testing PC games, the G2 could get much higher frame rates, however, this screen is only 60 Hz. So if you lock your games at 60 FPS on both the G2 and the RP5, the G2 uses less power to get that same game running with the same FPS cap because it has more power. It uses less energy if it's locked down. I didn't do extensive battery drain tests. I'm going to leave that up to the retro game corpses and the retro tech dads of the world, but I've always been impressed with the battery on the RP5, and I'm fully expecting to be more impressed with the G2. However, up until now, I haven't addressed the elephant in the room. The elephant named the Retroid Pocket 6. Can you imagine if there was actually an elephant named the Retroid Pocket 6? I kind of love the thought of that. The Retroid Pocket 6 is on the horizon. The Retroid Pocket G2 is available now, and it's shipping now, but the Retroid Pocket 6 won't be shipping until January. The Retroid Pocket 6 uses the same chipset as the Ein Thor, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, so you can expect a performance bump, and importantly, the RP6 has a 120Hz screen, which is great for PC emulation to play games like Megabonk at high frame rates. It's the same screen size though, so the devices shouldn't actually feel that much different. I'm curious to know what's changed on the RP6. The product renderings make it look more or less the same as the RP5 design, but I can't say if it'll be as good or worse or better. We need to wait and see. However, we do know that the price is actually kind of great. The base version of the Retroid Pocket 6 is $210 plus shipping, only $10 more than the Retroid Pocket G2. Or you can pay extra to get more RAM and storage, which would be better for PC games and Switch emulation. I'm not going to speculate on how good the RP6 will be. I can't say for sure, so we're just going to have to wait and see. But we know that the RP5 is great, and the RPG2 is a better version of the RP5, and it's within spitting distance in terms of performance of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 that we have in the Retroid Pocket 6. So to be honest, I can see an argument for getting the G2 over the RP6, and vice versa. It's a bit confusing that they came out with this so close to the RP6, and it's also just a confusing product lineup right now. I feel bad for anyone who's sorta new to this hobby trying to decide which one to get. Like I feel staring at a wall of donuts trying to pick which one will taste the best to me. The positioning of the RPG2 is weird, to be honest. It's a weird name. In the past, Retroid had the Retroid Pocket 3, and then they came out with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which was just an upgraded chip. And then on the Retroid Pocket 4, they had the RP4 and the RP4 Pro. And this Retroid Pocket G2 really feels like it should have been called the Retroid Pocket 5 something, like the RP5 Plus or the RP5 Pro. It's not a different thing than the RP5. It's just a more souped up version. It just feels inconsistent. I don't know if regular people looking to buy a retro doodad will realize that this RPG2 is the Snapdragon G2 version of the RP5, just by the naming conventions, you know? With all that said, I really love this RPG2. It's an RP5, which I love, and more powerful. Who wouldn't want that? I don't really know why it exists now, considering the Retroid Pocket 6 is coming. Kind of feels like two very similar products coming along at the same time that are going to end up competing with each other. However, maybe once we get the RP6, it'll make sense. Maybe it's truly the next evolution, or maybe it's more of the same. I don't know. But I will say that right now, based on what's available from Retroid and also the landscape in general, the Retroid Pocket G2 is the one to get if you're in the market for a mid-range Android handheld. For all the same reasons that the RP5 was my go-to recommendation before this came along. No reason to get a peanut butter cream donut when the macadamia custard version is the same price but better. And maybe the next donut will outshine that one. We'll have to wait and see. But until then, I'm gonna eat my macadamia custard donut with a big old smile on my face and not worry about what future donuts hold. Kinda like life if you think about it. Flavors change, people come and go, retro doodads come and go. One day it's peanut butter cream, the next it's the Snapdragon G2 Gen 2. That's just how life is. Always shifting, always surprising you with macadamia nut custard. But that doesn't mean you can't stop for a second, appreciate what you've got, and enjoy it while it's good. Like this sweet, creamy Retroid Pocket G2 that I have right here. And I'm going to enjoy every bite. I'm TechDweeb, thanks for watching, bye-bye!